Please take her to the hospital. Her drunk dad hit her in the head. A boy begged a Hell's Angel and called his crew the Rain came down hard that Tuesday evening, hammering the tin roof of the Last Chance saloon like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and leather. A jukebox hummed a low country tune, but nobody was listening. Bear sat in the corner booth, a mountain of a man with a graying braid hanging over his shoulder. His face carried a long scar from a fight long ago, and his eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He wrapped his thick fingers around a mug of black coffee, watching the steam rise. He was 45 years old, and he had seen just about everything this world had to offer. Most of it he wished he had not seen at all. The swinging doors burst open with a loud bang. A boy stumbled in, soaked to the bone. His shirt was dark with rainwater, but something else stained the fabric. Something red. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, and his eyes, wide and wild, scanned the room. He ignored the men at the bar. He ignored the pool table in the back. He locked onto Bear like a lost ship finding a lighthouse. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The boy ran straight across the wooden floor, his wet sneakers squeaking and slipping. He grabbed Bear's leather vest with both trembling hands, his knuckles white. "Please take her to the hospital," he cried, his voice cracking. Her drunk dad hit her in the head. Bear did not move at first. He studied the boy. The terror in his eyes was real, the kind of terror that cannot be faked. The boy's hands shook, and his breath came out in short, ragged gasps. "Please," the boy begged again, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "She's bleeding. She won't wake up." Bear looked down at the boy's hands. They were small for his age. A 14-year-old, maybe, but his eyes held the weight of someone much older. Someone who had seen too much. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as Bear stood up. His frame cast a long shadow over the boy. He placed a heavy, calloused hand on the boy's shoulder, and the boy flinched. Then, slowly, the boy looked up at him. "Show me where she is," Bear said. His voice was low and steady. It was the kind of voice that did not ask questions, because it already knew the answers. The boy nodded, a sob escaping his lips. Bear pulled out an old flip phone from his vest pocket. His thick fingers pressed a single button. The line rang once, twice, and then someone picked up. "Need all hands," Bear barked into the phone. "Last chance." Now, outside, the sound of engines began to rumble. A deep, throaty roar that grew louder and louder. One by one, motorcycles pulled up in front of the saloon. The first one was a big black machine with chrome pipes that gleamed even in the rain. 11 more followed, their headlights cutting through the downpour like bright yellow eyes. Bear did not wait for them. He followed the boy out of the saloon, into the storm. The rain hit his face hard, but he did not blink. The boy pointed to a battered pickup truck parked across the street. Its door hung open. The dome light was on, spilling pale yellow light onto the wet asphalt. Bear walked faster. His boots splashed through puddles, and his heart pounded against his ribs. He did not know why. He had helped strangers before. He had stood up for people who could not stand up for themselves. But something about this boy felt different. The boy reached the truck first and climbed into the back. Bear followed, peering over the tailgate. And there she was. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, with blonde ringlets plastered to her pale face. A deep gash cut across her forehead, still oozing blood. Her eyes were closed. Still, too still. Bear felt his chest tighten. "Lily," the boy whispered, his voice breaking, "please wake up." Bear reached out a huge scarred hand and gently touched her cheek. She was cold, too cold. A low growl rumbled in Bear's chest, and he turned to the boy. "What is your name, son?" The boy looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Danny," he said. "Her name is Lily. And she's all I got." Behind them, the roar of 12 motorcycles filled the night. Bear scooped the little girl into his massive arms as gently as he could manage, cradling her against his leather vest. "Is she gonna be okay?" Danny asked, his voice barely a whisper. Bear looked at the child in his arms, then at the boy who had trusted him. He did not say the words he was thinking. He simply climbed onto the lead motorcycle, with Lily wrapped against his chest. "Hold on," he said. "We're going to make it." The rain did not let up. It came down in thick sheets, turning the street into a river of black water. Bear moved fast, his boots splashing through puddles as he carried Lily toward his SUV. It was a big, boxy machine, painted matte black with chrome rims that caught the streetlights. It looked like a tank. It moved like one, too. Danny ran beside him, his small legs struggling to keep up. His sneakers were soaked through, and his breath came out in sharp, panicked gasps. He kept his eyes locked on Lily, on her pale face, on the blood that would not stop seeping from her forehead. Bear reached the SUV and yanked open the back door. The interior smelled like old leather and motor oil. He laid Lily across the back seat as gently as he could manage, which was very gently indeed for a man with hands the size of cinder blocks. He placed a folded jacket under her head and tucked a dirty blanket around her small, shivering body. She looked so tiny lying there. So fragile. Danny climbed in beside her. His hands shook as he reached out and took his sister's hand. Her fingers were cold. He held them anyway. "It's okay, Lily," he whispered. "I'm right here." Bear slammed the door shut and ran around to the driver's side. As he climbed in, the roar of engines filled the night. 12 motorcycles pulled up around the SUV, forming a loose circle. Their headlights cut through the rain like bright yellow eyes. One of the riders, a woman with a military short pixie cut and a toolbox tattooed on her forearm, pulled up to Bear's window. Rain dripped off her leather cut. "Bear," she shouted over the engine noise. "What do we got?" "Little girl. Head wound. She's fading." Bear's voice was flat, but his hands were tight on the steering wheel. "We need to get her to St. Mary's." Now, Jinx nodded once. She turned to the crew and raised 2 fingers. A signal. 2 bikes pulled ahead of the SUV. 2 more fell behind. The rest flanked the sides, forming a moving wall of leather and chrome around the truck. Bear floored the accelerator. The SUV lunged forward, its engine growling like an angry animal. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the rain, but Bear did not slow down. He knew these streets. He had raced through them 100 times in his younger days, when he had nothing to lose and less to live for. Now he had something to live for. He did not know what it was yet. But he felt it, burning in his chest like a coal. The crew moved with him, 2 bikes in front, carving a path through the sparse traffic. Their riders waved their arms, shouting at cars to move. Headlights flashed. Horns blared. But the bikes did not stop, and neither did Bear. Danny held Lily's hand in the back seat. His voice was a steady, low murmur. "Remember when we watched that movie about the astronauts? You fell asleep halfway through. You never told Mom that I carried you to bed. I always thought that was funny. You woke up in your bed and didn't even know how you got there. I used to think that was the best trick." Bear's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The boy was talking, keeping his sister company, keeping his own fear from swallowing him whole. A police siren wailed in the distance. Then, another. Red and blue lights flashed in the mirror, growing closer. Bear gripped the wheel tighter. He had a record, a long one. He did not need this. But Jinx pulled up beside him, her bike leaning into the curve. She raised a hand and waved at the police car, pointing toward the hospital ahead. Then she made a symbol with her fingers, a quick gesture that Bear recognized, a signal used by old bikers who understood the cops and the cops understood back. The police car slowed, its siren cut off. The lights stayed on, but it fell back, no longer chasing. They knew. They saw the little girl in the back. They saw the blood. Bear let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The SUV flew through a red light. Another. The crew stayed with him, a wall of thunder and steel. Rain pelted the windshield in thick waves, but Bear did not slow. He had a path. He had a purpose. The hospital loomed ahead, its bright lights cutting through the storm like a beacon. St. Mary's. The emergency bay was open, and a team of orderlies was already waiting at the doors, pushing a gurney. Bear slammed the brakes. The SUV screeched to a stop, its tires smoking on the wet pavement. He threw open his door and ran around to the back, yanking it open. Lily was still. Too still. But her chest rose. Fell, rose, fell. Bear lifted her out of the seat, cradling her against his chest like she was made of glass. The orderlies rushed forward with the gurney, and Bear laid her down gently, his huge hands trembling for the first time in years. Danny stumbled out of the SUV behind him. His face was pale and wet, and his legs were shaking. He reached out and grabbed Bear's vest. "Please," he whispered, "don't leave her alone." Bear looked down at the boy. Then he looked at Lily as the orderlies wheeled her through the emergency doors. He did not say a word. He just followed. The orderlies moved fast. They were a blur of blue scrubs and latex gloves. One of them, a young man with a shaved head, pressed a wad of gauze against Lily's head. Another was already cutting away her shirt, exposing her small, pale chest. Bear set her down gently. His hands hovered in the air, not sure what to do with themselves now that they were empty. He watched as they wheeled her through the swinging double doors. A nurse wrote something on a whiteboard with a squeaky marker. Then, the doors swung shut. The hallway fell silent. Danny took a step forward, then another. He moved like a ghost, his eyes fixed on the crack between the doors where he had last seen his sister's face. He took another step. A nurse stepped into his path, her face kind but firm. "Sir, you can't go back there. I'm her brother," Danny said. His voice cracked. "I understand, sir, but you're not family. You'll have to wait here." The nurse looked at him with pity. She was just doing her job. But the word sorry hung in the air unsaid. Danny's face did something then. It did not crumble. It did not fall apart. It just retreated. Like a turtle pulling into its shell. He nodded once and turned away. Bear caught him before he could take a step. His hand, big and heavy, landed gently on Danny's shoulder. "Over here, son," He guided him past a row of plastic chairs with torn vinyl seats. A vending machine hummed in the corner, its lights casting a sickly blue glow on the linoleum floor. Bear sat down heavily, the chair groaning under his weight. He pulled Danny down beside him. The boy was shaking. Bear did not say anything. He just sat there, a solid presence in the cold room. He folded his hands in his lap. They were huge, calloused hands, covered in old scars and new scabs. They looked out of place in the sterile clean of the hospital. The doors to the waiting rooms swung open. Bear did not turn. He already knew who it was. Jinx walked in first, her boots silent on the tile. She shot a look around the room, cataloging the exits, the angle of the chairs, the place where the wall met the floor. Then she leaned against the wall opposite Bear and crossed her arms. Mickey came in next, shaking the rain from his leather vest. He gave a small nod to Bear and then took up a spot by the window, his eyes fixed on the dark street outside. More of the crew filtered in after him. They came in twos and threes, their leathers dark with rain, their faces grim. They did not say a word. They did not need to. They just stood there. A wall of leather and hair and tattoos, lining the white walls of the waiting room like a grim row of gargoyles. A nurse walked by, doing a double take. She smiled nervously and hurried past, clutching her coffee cup a little tighter. An elderly man in a hospital gown shuffled out of the bathroom and stopped dead at the sight of them. His mouth made a small O. Bear looked up and met his eyes. He said nothing. He just raised a single eyebrow. The man scuttled backward into the bathroom and shut the door. Bear went back to studying his hands. He did not know how long they sat there. Time moved in fits and starts. The clock on the wall was a blunt object, its hands glowing with a dull red light. Someone had set it wrong. The minutes did not match the hour. It did not matter. Time had no meaning beyond that door. 20 minutes passed. Maybe it was longer. Bear's mind had stopped working. It was just a blur of white, and the beep of machines, and the sound of his own heart beating in his ears. Then the double doors swung open. A middle-aged woman in a white coat walked out. She was tall and lean, with her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were tired. They did not look scared, but they were watchful. She carried a clipboard, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Her gaze swept the waiting room, taking in the bikers, and settled on Bear. "Bear?" she asked. Bear stood up slowly. Danny rose with him, clutching the hem of his vest. The doctor walked over to them, her clogs making a soft squelching sound on the linoleum. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to give them space. She looked at Danny, then back at Bear. Her eyes were tired, but they were kind. "Eleanor, I'm the attending physician," she said. Her voice was warm. "Quiet. How is she?" Bear asked. "She's stable. We were able to clean and stitch the gash on her head. She's going to be fine." Bear closed his eyes for a moment. He felt Danny's body sag against his arm. "But," the doctor continued, her voice turning serious, "we did notice something unusual on her x-rays." She paused, and a heavy silence filled the air. She looked down at her clipboard, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with a terrible gentleness. "There are old fractures on both of her forearms. Midshaft. Different stages of healing." She looked up from the board and met Bear's eyes. "She also has several healed rib fractures. On both sides." and a depressed fracture of the right orbital bone, which is starting to remodel. She let the words hang in the air. That's not from a hit and run, Bear. Those are old wounds. Wounds that were never treated. Bear felt the words like a physical blow. They hit him in the chest, stealing the air from his lungs. The world narrowed to the tile floor in front of him. He could not look at Danny. He could not look at the doctor. He could only stare at a small, black scuff mark on the white floor and wonder how many other scuff marks like it were hidden under the bright lights. The doctor took a deep breath. An X-ray of her upper chest showed a shadow we believe is mass effect from an old pulmonary contusion, which is consistent with a significant amount of force to her torso within the past few months. We've consulted with a pediatrician. She fixed Bear with a clear, hard look. We need to know the full story. Was she in a car accident recently? Has she shown any signs of speech difficulty? And the cut on her forehead is a few hours old. The one that needed blood. Silence. The room went still. Bear could feel his own pulse in his ears. He was looking at Danny. The boy had gone pale, his freckles standing out like drops of blood on white paper. His hands were shaking. Bear's arm came up of its own accord, draping around Danny's thin shoulders and pulling him close. He felt the boy's frame trembling against his side. He held on tighter. He looked at the doctor, but his voice was meant for the boy. "It's all right, son," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "You can tell her." The doctor led them down a narrow hallway. Her clogs squeaked softly on the waxed floor. She stopped at a small door with a frosted glass window and pushed it open. The room was small. A round table sat in the center, surrounded by 4 chairs. A box of tissues sat on the table, and a poster of a smiling sun hung crooked on the wall. The lights were harsh and white. Bear guided Danny to a chair and sat down beside him. The doctor closed the door and took a seat across from them. She folded her hands on the table and waited. Danny stared at his hands. His knuckles were white, gripping his knees. His whole body was shaking, small tremors running through his thin frame like leaves in a wind. "It's okay," Bear said, his voice low and steady. "Take your time." Danny opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. A sound came out, but it was not a word. It was a sob, raw and broken. Then the words came, tumbling out of him like water through a cracked dam. "That man isn't my real dad." Bear went still. The words hit him like stones. "He's my stepfather. He married my mom when I was 3. Lily isn't my sister by blood. She's his daughter from a woman he knew before." Danny's voice broke. Tears streamed down his face, leaving pale tracks on his dirt-stained cheeks. He's been hurting her for years. Since she was tiny. I tried to stop him. I tried everything. I stood in front of her. I took hits for her. But he's bigger than me. He's always been bigger than me. The doctor's face was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp, watching Danny with careful attention. Tonight he got drunk. He got real drunk. And he hit her with a bottle. He hit her so hard she went down and didn't get up. Danny's voice got smaller, barely a whisper. "I thought she was dead. I thought he killed her." Bear's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. His hand, huge and scarred, rested on the table. It was very still. "I stole his truck. I grabbed her and I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. I drove until I couldn't drive anymore. And then I saw your bar." Danny looked up at Bear, his eyes red and swollen. "I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know if anyone would help. But you looked like someone who could stop him. Bear heard the words. He felt them land in his chest, heavy and sharp. He looked at the boy sitting across from him, this thin, shaking kid who had carried his sister to safety on his own back, who had stolen a truck and driven through the night with his little sister bleeding in the back seat, who had walked into a biker bar and asked a stranger for help. He turned to the doctor. Then he looked back at Danny. You did the right thing, kid, Bear said. His voice was rough. I'm not letting anyone touch her again. Danny's face crumpled. He put his head down on the table and sobbed, his shoulders shaking with the force of it. Bear did not move. He just sat there, a solid presence, his hand resting near the boy's arm. The doctor stood. She walked to the door and paused. I need to document this, she said quietly. The police will need to be involved. Child Protective Services will be notified. Bear nodded. Do what you need to do. She left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Bear pulled out his phone. His hands were steady, but his breathing was not. He scrolled through his contacts and pressed a name. It rang once, twice, 3 times. A gruff voice answered. Bear. It's 2 a.m. This better be good. Mickey, Bear said. His voice had gone flat, controlled. I need you to get an emergency custody lawyer down to County General, right now. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Mickey's voice came through, sharp and alert. What happened? Kids, 2 of them. They're mine. Bear said the words and felt them land like stones in still water. I'll explain when you get here. Just come. Another pause. Then Mickey spoke, his voice steady. I'm on my way. The line went dead. Bear put the phone down on the table. He looked at Danny, who had lifted his head, his tear-streaked face searching Bear's. Bear reached across the table and took Danny's hand in his own. The boy's hand was small and cold. Bear's hand wrapped around it, warm and solid. We're going to fix this, Bear said. I promise. Danny squeezed his hand. He did not say anything. He did not have to. A knock came at the door. 3 knocks. Firm, official, Bear looked up. The door opened, and 2 uniformed police officers stepped in. Behind them stood a woman in a plain gray suit, carrying a folder. Her face was stern, and her eyes were careful. She looked at Bear, then at Danny, and her expression softened just a fraction. The 2 officers stepped fully into the room. The one in front was tall and broad-shouldered, with a gray mustache and kind eyes that looked tired. The other was younger, with a buzz cut and a notebook already in his hand. The woman in the gray suit followed them in. She introduced herself as Mrs. Alvarez, a social worker from the county office. Her voice was calm, but her eyes moved quickly, taking in everything. She saw Danny's shaking hands. She saw Bear's protective stance behind his chair. She saw the box of tissues on the table and the crumpled, tear-soaked sleeve of Danny's shirt. Son, the older officer said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from Danny. My name is Officer Reed. I need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight. Can you tell me your name? Danny looked at Bear first. Bear gave a small nod. Danny, he said. His voice was thin, barely there. Danny Carter. Officer Reed wrote it down. And the little girl in the emergency room, that's your sister? Danny's chin trembled. She's my sister. Even if she's not by blood, she's my sister. Officer Reed's face softened. I understand, son. Can you tell me what happened tonight? Danny wiped his nose with the back of his hand. He spoke in fits and starts, the words coming out in chunks. He told them about the drinking, about the bottle, about the sound Lily made when she hit the floor. His voice cracked more than once, but he kept going. Mrs. Alvarez wrote notes in her folder. Her pen scratched across the paper. The sound filled the small room. When Danny finished, Officer Reed leaned back. He exchanged a look with the younger officer, who nodded once. "We're going to need to talk to the stepfather," Officer Reed said. "The hospital's automatic notification system already called him. He's been informed his daughter was brought in. He's on his way." Bear stiffened. His hand tightened on Danny's shoulder. "On his way?" Bear said. His voice was low, a growl barely held in check. "Yes, we'll intercept him when he arrives. We have officers stationed by the main entrance. We'll take him into a separate room for questioning." Bear shook his head. "No, you take him into a room, but you keep him away from the kids. You keep him away from that door." Officer Reed held up a hand. "We know what we're doing, sir." Bear stepped around Danny's chair. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he stood between the officers and the door. His leather cut seemed to fill the space. His arms crossed over his chest. "You don't know him," Bear said. "I've seen men like him before. They don't wait for questions. They don't wait for paperwork. They come in hot, and they grab what they think is theirs." Officer Reed studied Bear for a long moment. Then he nodded. "We'll have officers in the waiting room. But I can't stop you from standing there, too." Bear nodded once. "That's all I need." He turned to Danny. The boy was still sitting at the table, small and pale. Bear crouched down so his eyes were level with Danny's. "Stay here with the doctor," Bear said. "Don't move from this room. You hear me?" Danny nodded. "What about Lily?" "I'll watch her," Bear said. "Nobody gets past me, I promise." He stood and walked out the door. The officers followed. Mrs. Alvarez paused at the doorway and looked back at Danny. Her face softened. "I'll check on your sister," she said. "You did the right thing, Danny. You were very brave." Danny did not answer. He just sat there, staring at his hands. Out in the waiting room, the crew had gathered. They stood in a loose line along the wall facing the entrance. Jinx was there, her arms crossed, her jaw set. Mickey stood beside her, his old leather cut patched with a law degree framed at home. A dozen others filled the space, bearded and tattooed, their boots planted wide. They did not look like men who were waiting for good news. Bear walked up to them. He did not have to say anything. Jinx looked at him. "We heard." "Where is he?" Mickey asked. "On his way," Bear said. "Hospital called him." Mickey's eyes went cold. "He's coming here? Tonight?" Bear nodded. "He wants his daughter back." Jinx pushed off the wall. "He's not getting her." The crew moved as one. They formed a wall between the entrance and the hallway that led to Lily's room. Their shoulders almost touched. Their leather jackets creaked as they shifted their weight. They stood in silence, waiting. The automatic doors slid open. A man stormed through. He was gaunt, with red veins crawling across his nose and cheeks. His denim jacket was soaked with rain. His eyes were wild, darting around the waiting room until they landed on the wall of bikers. "Where's my daughter?" he shouted. His voice was raw and rough. "She's mine. I want her. Now." Bear stepped forward. His boots echoed on the tile floor. He stopped a few feet from the man and crossed his arms. "She's not yours anymore." The stepfather's face twisted, his hands clenched into fists. You don't know nothing about me, biker boy. Those kids are mine. That little girl is mine. I raised her. I fed her. I put a roof over her head. You can't just. Bear did not move. She has a broken arm that never healed right. She has scars on her back. That's how you raised her? The stepfather's eyes went wide. For a moment, he looked like a cornered rat. Then, rage took over. He lunged. It happened fast. His body shot forward, his hands reaching for Bear's throat. But before he got within a foot, two of the crew grabbed him. They caught him by his arms and yanked him back hard. His legs went out from under him. Get off me, he screamed. Get your hands off me. I'll sue you all. I'll ruin you. The older officer, Officer Reed, cut through the crowd with two security guards behind him. They pulled the stepfather to his feet and twisted his arms behind his back. Sir, you're under arrest for disturbing the peace, Officer Reed said. You can make a statement at the station. The stepfather's head whipped around. His eyes locked onto Bear. This isn't over, he snarled. You hear me? This isn't over. He was dragged toward the exit, still screaming. The automatic doors slid shut behind him, muffling his voice. The waiting room fell silent. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward. She had been standing near the nurse's station, holding her folder against her chest. She looked at Bear. I'll file for a temporary protective order first thing in the morning, she said. He won't be able to come near the children. Bear nodded. Make it fast. She nodded and walked away. Bear turned and looked down the hallway. The door to Lily's room was closed. Two of his crew stood in front of it, arms crossed, unmoving. The fluorescent lights above them hummed softly. Danny appeared in the doorway of the small consultation room. He was leaning against the frame, pale and exhausted. His eyes were red, and his shoulders sagged. Bear walked over to him. He did not say anything. He just stood beside the boy, a mountain in leather, both of them listening to the hum of the lights. The private pediatric room was small and quiet. The walls were painted a soft blue, with a mural of cartoon whales swimming across one side. A single window looked out over the parking lot, where the rain had finally slowed to a drizzle. Lily lay in the center bed, her small body swallowed by the white sheets. Her head was wrapped in clean bandages. A thin tube ran from her arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging on a metal pole. The machine beside her beeped in a steady rhythm, a tiny green light blinking with each heartbeat. Bear stood in the doorway. He filled the frame, his broad shoulders blocking most of the light from the hallway. He had not moved for almost an hour. He just watched her chest rise and fall, making sure each breath came. Danny sat in a hard plastic chair beside the bed. His hand rested on Lily's small fingers, his thumb moving in slow circles across her knuckles. He had not let go since they brought her up from the emergency room. A nurse came in. She was older, with gray-streaked hair and a kind face lined with years of late shifts. She carried a folded blanket in her arms and a small cloth pacifier in her other hand. Here, sweetheart, she said softly, draping the blanket over Danny's shoulders. It's cold in here. You need to keep warm. Danny looked up at her. His eyes were glassy, but he managed a small nod. The nurse placed the pacifier on the pillow beside Lily's head, for when she wakes up. It might help settle her. Bear watched the nurse's hands as she smoothed the blanket over Danny's back. Something stirred in his chest. A strange ache, like a memory he could not grasp. He had seen this scene before, somewhere, sometime, a woman leaning over a child. A gentle touch in a dark room. But the memory slipped away before he could hold it. He blinked and shook his head. Down the hallway, the crew had set up a quiet post. Jinx sat on the floor with her back against the wall, a paper cup of vending machine coffee steaming in her hands. Mickey stood by the window, watching the parking lot. The others took turns, 2 at a time, standing guard outside Lily's door. They did not speak much. There was nothing to say. At 2 in the morning, Lily's eyes fluttered open. They were small and blue, cloudy with sleep. She blinked slowly, her gaze drifting across the ceiling before landing on Danny. "Danny?" she whispered. Her voice was barely a breath. Danny leaned forward, his hand tightened around her fingers. "I'm here, Lily, I'm right here." Her eyes found his face. A tiny smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You're safe now," Danny said. His voice cracked, but he held steady. "You're safe. I promise." Lily's eyes drifted closed. Her breathing evened out, soft and slow. She was asleep again. Bear stepped closer to the bed. He stood at the foot, looking down at the 2 children. The little girl with the bandaged head. The boy with the tired eyes who had been holding everything together for far too long. Something broke inside him, a wall he had built years ago, brick by brick, to keep the world out. It crumbled in the quiet hum of the machines and the soft glow of the nightlight. A tear slid down his scarred cheek. He did not wipe it away. He looked at Lily, at her small chest rising and falling. At Danny, who had finally let his head droop, exhaustion pulling him down. "I've got you, little one," Bear said, so quiet the words were almost soundless. "I've got you both." He pulled a chair from the corner of the room and set it down beside Danny. He sat heavily, his knees popping, his leather jacket creaking. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on Lily's face. Danny shifted in his chair. Without opening his eyes, he leaned toward Bear, his head coming to rest against the big man's arm. Bear did not move. He let the boy lean, let him rest. The 3 of them sat there, huddled together in the small blue room. The machines beeped. The rain tapped against the window. The night stretched on. Then the morning light began to seep through the blinds. Pale and golden, it crept across the floor and climbed the walls. It touched Lily's cheek, soft as a kiss. They were still asleep. Danny's head on Bear's arm. Bear's hand resting on the edge of Lily's bed. Lily's fingers curled around her brother's, holding on even in dreams. The first rays of sun filled the room with warmth, and the 3 of them slept on, together. Chapter 7. The morning after the sun had barely climbed over the rooftops when a woman in a pressed gray suit appeared in the doorway of Lily's room. She carried a leather briefcase and a no-nonsense expression. Her name tag read Karen Marsh, Social Services. Bear straightened in his chair. Danny stirred beside him, blinking awake. "Mister? Bear?" Karen said, her voice professional and cool. "I need to speak with you about the children." Bear rose slowly. His joints ached from the night on the hard chair. He stepped out into the hallway, leaving Danny inside with Lily. Karen opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. The stepfather, Vernon Hale, has been detained pending a hearing. He's being held without bail for now. Bear nodded. His jaw tightened. "But the children can't stay in the hospital forever," Karen continued. "Lily will need a few more days of observation. After that, they'll be placed in an emergency foster home unless a responsible adult steps forward." The words hung in the air. Bear looked through the window into the room. Danny had turned back to Lily, his hand finding hers again. The little girl's eyes were open, watching her brother with a sleepy trust that made Bear's chest ache. "They come with me." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "They come with me," Bear repeated. His voice was flat and certain. "I'm their father." Karen studied him. Her eyes moved over his leather cut, his scarred face, his graying braid. She saw the tattoos on his knuckles, the heavy boots, the silver rings. "You'll need to prove that," she said slowly. "But I can authorize a temporary placement pending a judge's decision." Bear nodded once. "Then let's go see a judge." The courthouse smelled like old wood and floor polish. Bear sat on a hard bench beside Mickey, who had traded his leather cut for a rumpled suit jacket that looked like it hadn't been worn in years. Danny sat on Bear's other side. The boy was quiet, his hands folded in his lap. He kept looking at Bear out of the corner of his eye. Mickey leaned over. "I filed the emergency petition this morning, along with a request for a restraining order against Hale. The judge should rule on both today." Bear grunted. "You understand what this means?" Mickey asked. "If the judge approves, you'll be temporary guardian. You'll be responsible for them." School, doctor visits, everything. Bear looked down at his hands. They were big hands, scarred hands, hands that had fixed motorcycles and thrown punches and held dying friends. "I understand," he said. Danny's voice was small. "Bear? What if the judge says no?" Bear turned to look at the boy. Danny's eyes were red-rimmed, but he held Bear's gaze. "He won't," Bear said. The courtroom doors opened. A clerk called their names. The judge was a woman with silver hair and sharp glasses. She read through the papers in silence while the courtroom held its breath. At last, she looked up. "Temporary guardianship is granted to Mr. Bear Callahan. A full custody hearing is set for 30 days. In the meantime, a restraining order is issued against Mr. Vernon Hale. He is to have no contact with the children." Bear let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Danny grabbed his arm. "She said yes?" "She said yes," Bear said. Danny's face crumpled. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He buried his face in Bear's shoulder, and Bear wrapped an arm around him, holding him steady. "All right," Bear murmured. "Let's go get your sister." The hospital discharged Lily that afternoon, despite the doctor's wishes to keep her another night. She was pale, her head still bandaged, but she smiled when she saw Bear in the doorway. "Bear," she whispered, reaching out her small hand. Bear crossed the room and knelt beside her bed. Her fingers were tiny against his palm. "Ready to get out of here?" he asked. Lily nodded. Then she said, "Is Danny coming?" "He's waiting outside with the bikes," Bear said. Lily's eyes went wide. "Bikes?" Bear smiled. It was a rusty thing, but it was real. The crew waited in the parking lot. A dozen motorcycles lined up in a row, engines rumbling. Jinx stood by her bike, holding a helmet sized for a child. Mickey leaned against his car, arms crossed. Bear carried Lily out of the hospital. She was wrapped in a blanket, her head resting against his shoulder. When she saw the motorcycles, her eyes went round. "Are those all for us?" she whispered. "Darn right," Bear said. Jinx stepped forward and settled the small helmet over Lily's head. It was pink, with a tiny flower sticker on the side. Lily giggled. Bear climbed onto his bike, settling Lily in front of him, snug and safe. Danny climbed on behind him, wrapping his arms around Bear's waist. The crew roared to life. 12 bikes, 1 car, a girl with a flower helmet, and a boy holding on to his father for the first time. The cottage sat at the end of a gravel lane, tucked among oak trees. It was small, with white trim and a porch swing that swayed gently in the early evening breeze. A vegetable garden ran along one side, tomatoes and beans growing in neat rows. Bear killed the engine. The crew parked in a loose semicircle, engines ticking as they cooled. The front door opened. An old woman stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. She was tiny, with white hair and kind eyes. "Bear," she said, "the place is ready." Bear carried Lily up the steps. The cottage smelled like bread and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, warming the small living room. He crossed to a worn couch with soft cushions and set Lily down gently. He pulled a quilt from the back of the couch and tucked it around her. Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were heavy with sleep. Bear rested his hand on her head, careful of the bandages. "This is your home for now." Danny stood in the doorway, looking around. His eyes moved over the fireplace, the bookshelf, the window with its view of the garden. He took a step inside. Then, another. He looked at Bear. And for the first time, Danny let himself believe it was real. Chapter 8. The safe house. The evening light slanted through the cottage windows, painting the walls in shades of gold and amber. The smell of pine and tomato soup filled the air. Bear knelt beside the couch where Lily sat propped against a mountain of pillows, a bowl of soup cradled in her small hands. She took a sip. Then another. Her eyes, still heavy with sleep, watched the door. The crew came in a steady stream. Jinx carried 2 bags of groceries. Mickey brought a chess set, the box worn and faded. Another member, a big man with a gray beard, set a teddy bear on the coffee table. It was brown and soft, with a red bow around its neck. Lily spotted it. Her spoon clattered against the bowl. "For me?" she whispered. Bear nodded. Jinx picked it out. Lily set her soup aside and reached for the bear. She hugged it tight, burying her face in its fur. When she looked up, her eyes were bright. "I'll call him Mr. Cuddles," she said. Bear's chest tightened. He cleared his throat and pointed to the bookshelf against the far wall. It was lined with old books, their spines cracked and faded. "There's storybooks over there," he said. "I ain't a great reader, but I can try." Danny, who had been quiet since they arrived, looked up from the grocery bags he was unpacking. A can of beans hovered in his hand. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was a small smile, barely there, but it was real. He set the can down and crossed to the coffee table. He picked up the chess set and opened the box. The pieces were worn, some chipped, but they were all there. Danny looked at Bear. "Teach me?" Bear blinked. The request caught him off guard. He had expected silence, maybe a request for food or a place to sleep. Not this. He rose from his knees and walked to the couch. He sat on the floor across from Danny, the board between them. "All right," Bear said. "Let's start simple." The crew filed out one by one. Jinx paused at the door, her hand on the frame. She looked at the 3 of them, Bear on the floor, Danny leaning over the board, Lily hugging her bear. She nodded once, then slipped out into the evening. The door clicked shut. The cottage settled into a quiet hum. The fire crackled. The clock on the mantel ticked. Bear moved a pawn forward, "This is how you start," he said. "You open the door for your other pieces." Danny studied the board. He moved his own pawn, mirroring Bear's move. "Why that one?" Bear asked. Danny shrugged. "It opens the door for my bishop." Bear looked at him. A slow grin spread across his scarred face. "You got a good eye." The night settled over the cottage like a blanket. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Bear sat on the edge of the couch, a picture book open in his hands. The cover showed a bear and a raven sitting on a log, watching the moon rise. Lily was tucked under the quilt, Cuddles pressed against her cheek. Her eyes fluttered, fighting sleep. Bear cleared his throat. He read slowly, stumbling over some words, but he kept going. His voice was low and rough, but it was steady. The bear said to the raven, "The moon is bright tonight," and the raven said, "It is always bright when you have a friend to share it with." Lily's eyes closed. Her breathing slowed. Her grip on Mr. Cuddles loosened. Bear closed the book. He sat there for a long moment, watching her sleep. Then he rose and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Danny sat by the fire, his knees pulled to his chest. He stared into the flames, his face unreadable. Bear crossed the room and sat beside him. The floorboards creaked under his weight. "You're brave, you know that?" Bear said. Danny shrugged. He didn't look away from the fire. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. The question hung in the air. Bear was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the fire too, watching the flames dance. "Because someone helped me once," he said, "a long time ago." Danny turned his head. His eyes searched Bear's face. "Who?" Bear shook his head slowly. "Someone who saw me when I couldn't see myself. She gave me a reason to keep going." Danny was quiet. Then, slowly, he leaned his head against Bear's shoulder. Bear felt the weight of it. The warmth, it spread through his chest like a slow fire, a feeling he hadn't had in decades. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sat there, letting the boy lean on him. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. And for the first time in a long time, Bear felt like he was home. The days at the cottage passed in a soft rhythm. Mornings brought the smell of coffee and toast. Afternoons brought board games and storybooks. Evenings brought the low rumble of motorcycles as the crew came to visit. Lily grew stronger with each sunrise. The color returned to her cheeks. The shadows under her eyes faded. On the second day, Bear made a silly face, crossing his eyes and puffing out his cheeks. Lily giggled. It was a tiny sound, almost lost in the air, but Bear heard it. He made another face. She giggled again. By the third day, she was laughing out loud, her small hands clapping together. "That's a funny bear," she said. Bear grunted. "I'm a funny guy." Chess became their afternoon ritual. Danny set up the board on the coffee table, his fingers quick and sure. Bear sat across from him, scratching his graying beard. "You sure about that move?" Danny asked. Bear studied the board. He moved his knight. "Yeah, I'm sure." Danny moved his queen. "Checkmate." Bear stared at the board. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that filled the cottage. Lily looked up from her coloring book and smiled. "I lost again," Bear said. "You're a little shark." Danny grinned. It was the first full grin Bear had seen from him. "You're getting better." "I'm getting worse," Bear said. "But I'm having more fun." The crew visited daily. Jinx arrived on the second morning with a package wrapped in brown paper. She handed it to Lily with a rare, soft smile. Lily unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a tiny leather vest. It was a perfect copy of the ones the crew wore, with a patch stitched on the back that read Little Angel. Lily's eyes went wide. She touched the leather with careful fingers. "For me?" "For you," Jinx said. "Every angel needs her colors." Lily put the vest on over her pajama shirt. It was a little big, but she wore it like armor. She spun in a circle, the vest flapping. Mickey came that afternoon with a book for Danny. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. "Treasure Island," Mickey said. "I read it when I was about your age. It's about a boy who goes on an adventure." Danny took the book. He ran his thumb over the cracked spine. "Thank you. Read it when you're ready," Mickey said. "Adventures are good for the soul." On the third day, a nurse from the hospital stopped by. Her name was Carol, and she carried a small bag with a stethoscope. She checked Lily's vitals, her temperature, her pupils. Then she sat back and stared. "You're a different child," Carol said softly. "Look at you. You're not flinching." Lily looked up from Mr. Cuddles. Her small face was calm. "The bear is nice," she said. "He doesn't shout." Carol's eyes glistened. She wrote something in her notebook and packed her bag. At the door, she paused. "Keep doing whatever you're doing," she said to Bear. "It's working." Bear nodded. "That's the plan." The stepfather stayed in jail. Mickey reported it over coffee on the third evening. "His court date is set," Mickey said. "He's not going anywhere." The judge saw the medical reports. Bear's jaw tightened. "Good," Mickey leaned forward. "You're doing the right thing, Bear. These kids need you." Bear looked across the room. Danny was reading Treasure Island by the fire. Lily was asleep on the couch, wearing her little vest. Mr. Cuddles was tucked under her arm. "I never thought I'd have this," Bear said quietly. Mickey patted his shoulder. "Neither did I, brother. Neither did I." On the fourth evening, the air grew heavy. Clouds rolled in from the west, gray and low. The smell of rain filled the porch. Bear sat on the wicker chair, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Danny was in the shower, the pipes humming. Lily was at the kitchen table, coloring with a fresh box of crayons. A drop of rain hit the porch railing. Then, another. Bear stood to go inside. His eye caught Danny's backpack, lying on the wicker chair beside him. It was unzipped, the side pocket gaping. He grabbed it to move it out of the rain. A faded photograph slipped out. It fluttered to the porch floor. Bear bent down and picked it up. His fingers brushed the edges. The photo was old, creased, the colors faded with time. A woman with a sunny grin looked back at him. Her hair was long and brown. Her eyes were bright. In her arms, she held a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Bear's breath caught. His hands began to shake. He knew that face. He had known it his whole life. He had loved it, lost it, and mourned it for 20 years. He turned the photo over. The handwriting was faded, but clear. Molly and Little Bear. Bear stared at the words. His heart pounded against his ribs. He looked at the cottage door, where steam rose from the bathroom window. He looked back at the photo. At the baby in Molly's arms. A wild, impossible thought struck him like lightning. The rain began to fall harder, drumming against the porch roof. Bear stood frozen, the photograph trembling in his thick fingers. The woman's smile seemed to glow even through the faded colors. The baby in her arms was tiny, wrapped in yellow. The bathroom door creaked open. Danny stepped out, a towel around his neck, his hair dripping wet. He stopped when he saw Bear standing on the porch, staring at something in his hands. Bear? You okay? Bear turned slowly. His face was pale beneath the scars. He held up the photograph. Who is this woman? Danny's face went white. His eyes locked on the photo, and his mouth fell open. He took a step back, then another. That's my mom, he whispered. She died 2 years ago. How do you know her? Bear's voice came out rough, cracking at the edges. Her name was Molly? Danny nodded slowly. His hands were shaking now. Yeah, Molly, that was her name. Bear closed his eyes. A ghost passed behind his lids. 20 years of memory flooded back. The smell of her hair, the sound of her laugh, the way she said his name like it was a song. I knew her, Bear said. A long time ago. She was my girlfriend. Danny's eyes went wide. He stepped closer, peering at the photo. His gaze moved from the woman to the young man beside her. The man had a full head of dark hair, no gray in his beard, and a smile that seemed foreign to the scarred face Bear wore now. But it was him. It was unmistakably him. Danny's jaw dropped. That's you. Bear nodded. That's me. Danny looked from the photo to Bear and back again. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. You knew my mom? Before she married him? Before everything, Bear said. We were young. We were in love. And then she disappeared. I looked for her for months, years I never found her. I thought she forgot me. Danny's eyes filled with tears. His voice cracked when he spoke. She never forgot you. She kept your picture too. She hid it in a book. She used to tell me you were a hero. She said you were the bravest man she ever knew. Bear's chest tightened. But the stepfather? Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He made her throw away any letters, any photos. He said you were trash. He said you abandoned her. But she never believed it. She told me stories about you, about the bear who was gentle. Bear's legs felt weak. He gripped the porch railing to steady himself. The rain pounded around them, but he barely heard it. Danny, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm your father. Danny froze. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. He stared at Bear, searching his face for a lie. He found none. You're my dad? Bear nodded. Tears rolled down his scarred cheeks. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. She never told me. If I had known, I would have found you. I would have moved heaven and earth to find you. Danny's legs gave out. He sank to the porch floor, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Bear dropped to his knees beside him and pulled the boy into his arms. Danny was small against his chest, trembling like a leaf. I'm sorry, Bear whispered into Danny's wet hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry for everything. Danny clung to him, his fingers digging into Bear's leather vest. She was right, he sobbed. She said you'd come. She said you'd find us. Bear held him tighter. I found you. I found you, son. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, the rain falling around them. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, father and son, finally together after 20 years of silence. A small voice came from the doorway. Daddy? Bear looked up. Lily stood there, her little vest on over her pajamas, Mr. Cuddles clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide and curious. Bear looked at her. Really looked at her. The stubborn chin, the way her nose crinkled, the same dimple that Molly had. His daughter. Hey, little one, he said, his voice thick with tears. Come here. Lily padded across the porch and climbed into his lap. She wrapped her small arms around his neck. Bear held both of his children, the rain washing over them, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt whole. That night, the safe house was quiet. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world clean and fresh outside the windows. Inside, the only light came from a small lamp on the table, casting warm shadows across the walls. Bear sat on the worn couch with Lily tucked against his side. She was still weak from her hospital stay, her head wrapped in fresh bandages, her small hand clutching his vest like a lifeline. Danny sat on the floor at their feet, his knees pulled up to his chest, his eyes fixed on Bear. "There's something I need to tell you both," Bear said. His voice was low and thick, the way it got when he was holding back tears. "Something I should have told you the moment I found out." Lily looked up at him. "Is it a story, Daddy?" Bear's heart squeezed at the word. Daddy. She had started calling him that only yesterday, and every time she said it, he felt like he might break open. "Yeah, little one. It's a story. A true one." He took a deep breath and began. "I met your mama at a county fair. She was working at a lemonade stand, and I was just a dumb kid with a motorcycle and too much attitude. I saw her smile, and I was gone. Hooked, I spent every dollar I had on lemonade just to keep talking to her." Danny smiled a little. "She did love lemonade. She loved a lot of things," Bear said softly. "We fell in love fast and hard. We were young, but we knew. At least, I knew. She was the best thing that ever happened to me." He paused, his eyes growing distant. "Then her family moved away. Just like that. One day she was there, and the next she was gone. I looked for her. I searched for years. But she disappeared. And I thought she chose to leave. I thought she forgot me." "She never forgot you," Danny said quietly. "She talked about you all the time, when he wasn't around." Bear nodded slowly. "I know that now. But I didn't know then, and I didn't know about the baby. She never told me she was pregnant. I never knew I had a son." Danny's breath caught. He had heard the words on the porch, but hearing them again, in the quiet of the safe house, made them real. Bear continued. "Molly's family moved, and she was alone. She met a man. Your stepfather. He seemed nice at first, I guess. Handsome and charming. He married her, and he took her name. He claimed you kids as his own, even though he never legally adopted you." Danny nodded. "He always said we were his. He made us call him Dad. But he never signed anything. I found the papers once, in his drawer. There was nothing legal. He just took us." Bear's jaw tightened. He was abusive to Molly. He hurt her for years, and when she got sick he didn't take care of her. He let her waste away. He broke her heart, and then he let her die. Tears streamed down Bear's face. He didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. "She died alone, thinking I had abandoned her. She died thinking no one was coming to save her children. But she was wrong. I'm here now. I found you. Both of you." Lily reached up and patted his cheek. "Don't cry, Daddy. Mama said you were brave." Bear choked on a sob. He turned his face into Lily's small hand and kissed her palm. "I'm not brave, sweetheart. You are. You and your brother. You're the bravest people I've ever known." Danny moved from the floor to the couch. He sat beside Bear, close enough that their shoulders touched. No words, just presence. Bear pulled them both into his arms. He held them tight, his children, his blood, his whole world. "You're my blood," he said, his voice cracking. "Both of you, and I'm never letting you go again." They sat like that for a long moment. Then Bear reached for his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. Mickey answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Bear? Do you know what time it is? I know, I need you. Bear's voice was steady now. I found my kids. My biological kids. Danny and Lily. They're mine. Silence on the other end. Then Mickey's voice, suddenly wide awake. Say that again. They're my children, Mickey. Molly's children. She never told me. The stepfather took them. I have a photo. I have proof. Mickey let out a long breath. Hold on. You're telling me you have a son and a daughter? Yes, and you want custody? I want my kids. Mickey was quiet for a moment. Then he said, We'll do a DNA test, but this is strong evidence. A photo, a story, witnesses. We can work with this. I'll start the paperwork tonight. Bear's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Mickey. Don't thank me yet. Just keep those kids safe. I'll be there in the morning. Bear hung up and looked at Danny and Lily. Danny's eyes were bright with hope. Lily's were half closed, her little body heavy with exhaustion. Come on, Bear said gently. Time for bed. He carried Lily to the bedroom and set her down on the bed. Then he looked at Danny. I want you to sleep with her tonight. She needs you close. Danny nodded and climbed onto the bed beside his sister. Bear pulled the blanket up to their chins. He looked at them. His children. His family. We'll be a real family soon, he promised. I swear it. Lily's eyes fluttered closed. Danny reached out and touched Bear's hand. Dad? The word hit Bear like a wave. Yeah, son? Thank you for finding us. Bear's tears fell again, hot and silent. He squeezed Danny's hand. Thank you for finding me. The next 2 days passed in a blur of motion and purpose. Bear woke before the sun each morning. He stood at the window of the cottage, watching the first light creep over the hills, and he felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Hope. Real hope. The kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. Mickey arrived early on the first day with a stack of papers thicker than his arm. He spread them across the kitchen table like a general planning a battle. Paternity petition, he said, tapping one page. Emergency custody order. Motion for a speedy hearing. And a request for a restraining order that covers both kids. Bear stared at the paperwork. You think it will hold? Mickey shrugged. The photo helps. The hospital records help more. Those X-rays show a long history of abuse. No judge in this county will send those kids back to Vern after seeing those. Bear nodded. He signed where Mickey told him to sign. Then he signed again. Later that morning, a nurse came to the cottage. She swabbed the inside of Bear's cheek, then Danny's, then Lily's. Lily giggled when the cotton swab touched her tongue. Tastes like nothing, she said. It's for a test, sweetheart, the nurse explained. To prove your daddy is your daddy. Lily looked up at Bear with wide eyes. He's my daddy. I already know that. Bear had to turn away so she wouldn't see him cry. The crew came by in shifts. Jinx showed up with a toolbox and a bag of cameras. She spent the afternoon climbing ladders and drilling holes, wiring motion lights to the corners of the cottage. By evening, the little house glowed like a fortress. Burglars, scaredy cats, and trouble, she said, dusting off her hands. If anything moves out there, we'll know about it. Vern's court date was set for the following week. Mickey said it was fast, faster than usual. The judge had seen the hospital photos and wanted to move quickly. Bear felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 1 week. He just had to keep the kids safe for 1 more week. On the second day, Bear dug out an old beeb gun from a box in the shed. He set up tin cans on a fallen log and showed Danny how to stand, how to aim, how to breathe. Slow and steady, Bear said, guiding Danny's hands. You don't rush a shot. You let the target come to you. Danny pulled the trigger. The bib pinged off a can, sending it spinning into the grass. Good shot, Bear said. Danny grinned. Can we do it again? They shot cans until the sun went down. Lily sat on the porch steps, wearing her tiny leather vest over her pajamas. She refused to take it off, even to eat dinner. It's my armor, she said. Bear laughed. You don't need armor, little one. I like it anyway. That night, they made cookies. Bear mixed the dough, Danny shaped the balls, and Lily pressed her thumb into each one to make a little dip. They were supposed to be chocolate chip, but Bear forgot the baking soda, so they came out flat and hard. Bear pulled the first tray from the oven and stared at the sad brown discs. Well, he said, these look like hockey pucks. Danny snorted. Lily burst into giggles, her little body shaking with laughter. Bear dropped a cookie onto a plate. It made a loud clunk. I think we invented a new snack, he said. Biker biscuits. They ate them anyway, dipping them in milk to soften them up. Even the burned ones, even the ones that tasted mostly like flour and regret. They laughed so hard that Bear's stomach hurt. For a moment, he forgot about Vern. For a moment, he forgot about the court date. For a moment, he was just a dad with his kids, making mistakes and laughing through them. That night, Bear tucked them into bed. Danny was already half asleep, his beeb gun propped against the wall like a prized possession. Lily clutched her teddy bear, the one the crew had given her. She wore her little vest to sleep, too, and Bear didn't have the heart to take it off. He kissed her forehead. Then, he kissed Danny's. I love you both, he whispered. More than you know. Danny mumbled something in his sleep. Lily sighed and curled into a ball. Bear turned off the light and closed the door. Then the phone rang. Bear picked it up. Mickey's voice was sharp and quick. Bear, the stepfather posted bail this afternoon. He's out. You need to be careful. Bear's blood ran cold. He gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. When? About 3 hours ago. He's gone from the county lockup. I don't know where he went, but I know he's angry. He lost everything, Bear, and men like that don't go quietly. Bear hung up. He stood in the dark hallway, his heart pounding against his ribs. He looked at the sleeping children through the crack in the door. Danny's face was peaceful. Lily's little chest rose and fell under her vest. He looked at the windows. The night pressed against the glass, dark and heavy. Bear quietly called his crew. One by one, they answered. One by one, they promised to come. I need you to circle the cottage, Bear said. Stay out of sight. Don't approach unless I call. How many of us? Jinx asked. All of you. He hung up and walked to the front door. He checked his pepper spray, holstered at his belt, and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had started again. Thin needles of water swept across the yard, glinting in the motion lights. The wind rattled the trees. Bear stood at the door, hand on the pepper spray, and peered into the dark rain-slicked night. He waited. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. Bear stood at the kitchen stove, flipping pancakes onto a plate. The batter was a little lumpy. He had tried to add chocolate chips and ended up with a mess. But he didn't care. He smiled at the little pile of golden circles. This was what normal felt like. Hey, sleepyheads, he called out. Breakfast is ready. No answer. Bear tilted his head. Danny usually came running at the smell of food. The boy had a bottomless stomach. And Lily, well, Lily loved her pancakes with extra syrup and a happy face drawn on top with blueberries. "Kids," Bear called again, "get up. You're going to be late for your own breakfast." Still nothing. A knot formed in Bear's stomach. He set down the spatula and walked toward the hallway. His boots made heavy thuds on the wood floor. "Danny? Lily?" He pushed open Danny's door first. The bed was empty. The covers were tossed aside, and the BB gun was still propped against the wall. "Danny?" Bear's heart sped up. He moved to Lily's room. The door was open. The window was open. The rain had blown in, soaking the floorboards. The little bed was empty. Her teddy bear was still there, sitting on the pillow like a tiny guard. Danny's voice shouted from somewhere behind him. "Bear, Bear." Bear turned. Danny came running down the hallway, his face white and tight. "Bear," he gasped. "Lily's gone. I looked outside, and she's gone." Bear's blood turned to ice. He went to the window. There, taped to the sill, was a piece of paper. The tape was wet, but the writing was clear, sharp, angry. "You can't protect her from me. I'll take her far away." Bear read it twice. Then a third time. The words burned into his eyes. He grabbed the paper and tore it down. He looked out into the rain. The fence line, the trees. Nothing moved. The morning light was gray and heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. Bear pulled out his phone and dialed 911. His voice was tight but steady. "I need police. A missing child. 6 years old. A man took her. He's her stepfather, and he's dangerous." He gave the address. He gave Vern's name. He gave everything he could think of. Behind him, Danny was shaking. His arms were wrapped around himself. His face was wet, and it wasn't from the rain. "It's my fault," Danny whispered. "I should have watched her. I should have locked the window." I fell asleep and Bear turned and gripped Danny's shoulders. Firm but gentle. "Look at me." Danny looked up. "Listen to me, son. You did nothing wrong. This is on him, not you. Do you hear me?" Danny nodded, but his lip was still trembling. Bear pulled him into a quick hug, a hard one, the kind that holds everything together. "We'll find her," Bear said. "I promise you. We will find her." Bear's crew arrived in minutes. They rolled up in a storm of bikes and trucks, leather and engines roaring into the driveway. Jinx was the first through the door, her face hard and focused. "Status," she said. "Just one word." Bear held up the note. Jinx read it and cursed under her breath. "Any idea where he took her?" she asked. Bear shook his head. "No, he could be anywhere by now." Jinx pulled out a small tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen. "Wait," she said, "hold on. Stepfather had a GPS tracker on his truck. Remember, he reported it stolen last summer. The police found it, but he never took the tracker off." "How do you know that?" Bear asked. "I fix his lawnmower. He talked too much." She grinned. It was not a warm grin. The screen flickered. A red dot blinked on a map. "Got him," Jinx said. "He's at a cabin on the cliffs. It's the old hunting shack. About 30 minutes north." Bear was already moving. He grabbed his keys and his jacket. He looked at Danny, who stood in the doorway of Lily's room, small and lost. "Bear, can I come? Please, I have to come." Bear hesitated. He looked at Jinx, who gave a tight nod. "You stay near me," Bear said. "You do exactly what I say." "Understood?" "Understood." The bikes and trucks roared to life. They formed a line, lights blaring, and tore out onto the highway. The rain hammered their leathers. The wind screamed past. Bear rode at the front. Danny was behind him, arms wrapped tight around his waist. The miles flew by. The cabins got fewer. The road got narrower. Bear leaned into the curves. He whispered into the wind, so low that no one could hear. "Hold on, Lily, I'm coming." The cabin appeared through the rain like a bad memory. It was a small, sagging shack with peeling paint and a porch that leaned to one side. A single porch light flickered, buzzing like a dying insect. Bear killed his engine. The crew did the same. In the sudden quiet, the rain filled the world. He motioned with his hand. The crew spread out in a wide circle. They moved like shadows, boots silent on the wet ground. Bear crept toward the grimy window. He wiped the glass with his sleeve and peered inside. His heart stopped. There was Vern. He had Lily under one arm like a sack of flour. Her head hung limp. Her arms dangled. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were half closed. He was shoving her into the back seat of an old sedan. Bear's hand went to the door handle. Jinx grabbed his wrist before he could move. "Wait," she whispered. "Give me 30 seconds." She slipped around to the back of the sedan. Her hand went under the hood. There was a click. Then nothing. Vern got into the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine made a sad, grinding sound. Then it died. He turned it again. Nothing. He cursed and slammed his fist on the steering wheel. He got out and kicked the front tire. Then he looked up. The bikers were everywhere. They stood in a loose circle around the cabin, arms crossed, faces hard. Rain dripped off their helmets and jackets. They did not move. Vern spun around. His eyes went wide. He yanked open the back door and pulled Lily out by her arm. Her body swayed like a doll. He pulled a hunting knife from his belt. The blade caught the flickering light. Bear's whole body went cold. Vern pressed the knife against Lily's throat. The tip touched her skin just below her chin. "Stay back." Vern screamed. "All of you. I'll cut her. I swear I'll cut her." Bear stepped forward. He raised his hands high, palms open. "Let her go," he said. His voice was calm. "Steady. Take me instead. She's just a kid, Vern. She's just a scared little kid." Vern laughed. It was a hollow, jagged sound. "You're her real father, aren't you?" he said. "I know you are. I saw the photo you found." Bear froze. Vern's grin twisted. His eyes were wild. "Molly never stopped loving you," Vern spat. "That's why I hated her. She looked at you in her sleep. She whispered your name when she thought I couldn't hear. 20 years I gave her, and she still loved a ghost." He pressed the knife tighter. Lily whimpered. Her small body trembled. Bear's hands shook. He kept them up. "Vern, listen to me. I know you're hurting. I know you loved her too." "Shut up." Vern's voice cracked. "You don't get to talk about her. You left her. You left her alone and pregnant and scared." Bear's jaw tightened. He took a slow step forward. "You're right," he said. "I did leave her. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I know now, and I know these kids deserve better than this." Vern's hand trembled. The knife wobbled against Lily's skin. "Better than what?" Vern hissed. "Better than me? I'm the only one who ever took care of them." Bear's eyes flicked to the side. Danny was gone from the cruise line. Jinx saw it too. Her hand moved to her belt. "Danny," Bear whispered under his breath. "Where are you, son?" Vern laughed again. "What's wrong, Bear?" "Cat got your..." The cabin's back corner exploded with motion. Danny burst out of the shadows, a blur of wet jacket and desperate courage. He launched himself at Vern's legs with everything he had. Vern went down hard. The knife clattered across the porch. Lily tumbled free, rolling onto the wet grass. She did not get up. Bear was already moving. He crossed the distance in 3 huge strides and threw himself onto Vern, pinning him to the ground with his full weight. He grabbed Vern's wrists and slammed them into the mud. "You hurt my daughter," Bear growled. His voice was low and shaking. "You hurt my boy. You will never touch them again." Vern struggled. He tried to bite, to kick, to squirm. It didn't matter. The crew was there now. Hands grabbed Vern's arms and legs. Jinx pulled a zip tie from her pocket and secured his wrists without a word. Mickey knelt beside Lily. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. "She's alive," he said. "Pulse is weak, but she's alive. We need to get her to a hospital." Now, Bear looked at Danny. The boy was standing over his sister, shaking, rain streaming down his face. "You did good," Bear said. "You did so good." Danny didn't answer. He just knelt and took Lily's hand. Bear lifted Lily gently into his arms. She was so light. Too light. He carried her to his bike and held her close against his chest. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. "Hold on." Danny hit Vern's legs from behind like a missile. His skinny arms wrapped around the man's knees. Vern staggered, boots sliding in the mud, arms flailing. Lily tumbled out of his grip. She hit the ground hard. Her head bounced once against the wet grass. Then, she lay still. Unconscious, Bear was already moving. He surged forward, muscles screaming, boots slamming through puddles. But he was too far. 10 steps. 12, Vern got his footing. He swung his leg back and caught Danny square in the ribs. The boy went flying. He rolled in the mud, clutching his side, gasping for air. Vern raised the knife. The blade flashed in the dim light. He pointed it down at Danny's chest. Bear screamed. No. He lunged. He was still too far. The knife started to fall. Then a soft pop split the night. A beanbag round tore through the rain and smacked into Vern's forearm. His hand flew open. The knife spun away and landed with a splash in the mud. Jinx stood at the cabin's corner, her launcher still raised. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her face was hard as stone. Bear slammed into Vern. They hit the dirt together. Mud exploded around them. Bear grabbed Vern's wrists and pinned them to the ground. "You hurt my daughter," Bear growled. His voice was low and shaking. "You hurt my boy. It's over." Vern thrashed. He tried to bite. To kick, he screamed curses into the rain. Bear didn't listen. He yanked off his own belt, the thick black leather strap he always wore. He looped it around Vern's wrists and pulled it tight. Crew members grabbed Vern's arms and legs. They held him secure as the buckle cinched. In the distance, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights leaked through the trees. Danny was on his hands and knees. He crawled past Vern, past the crew, past the mud. He crawled to Lily. She was not moving. Her face was pale, almost gray. Her chest barely rose. "Lily," Danny whispered. His voice cracked. "Lily, wake up. Please wake up." She didn't answer. Bear was there in an instant. He knelt beside her and scooped her up into his arms. She was so light, too light. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. His hand trembled. "Pulse is weak," he said. Then louder, desperate, "We need an ambulance." Mickey checked his phone. "No signal. We're too far out. Nearest hospital is 30 minutes away." Bear looked at his truck. It sat at the edge of the clearing, old and battered but strong. He could make it. He ran. Lily clutched against his chest. Rain soaked them both. Jinx had the truck door open before he got there. Bear laid Lily across the back seat as gently as his shaking hands allowed. He folded his leather jacket and placed it under her head. Danny climbed into the passenger seat. His face was pale. He held his ribs with one hand and reached back to touch Lily's hand with the other. "Stay with her," Bear said. "Keep talking to her. Don't let her go to sleep." Danny nodded. Tears streamed down his face. "You hear me, Lily? It's Danny. You gotta stay awake, okay? We're gonna get you help." Bear jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared. Through the windshield, he saw police cars pulling into the clearing. Officers spilled out, guns drawn. They surrounded Vern, who was still pinned by the crew. One officer shouted. Bear didn't wait to hear it. He floored the gas. The truck lunged forward, tires digging into the mud, then catching hard. Behind him, the crew fired up their bikes. A dozen engines thundered. Headlights cut through the rain like a pack of wolves. They formed a wall around the truck. Leather and steel, brothers and sisters. Family, Bear gripped the wheel with white knuckles. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily lay on the back seat. Her lips were turning blue. Her eyes were closed. Her small chest barely moved. "Hang on," Bear whispered. His voice broke. "Hang on, baby girl. Daddy's got you." He pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck flew down the dark road. Rain hammered the roof. The crew's lights swirled around him. Bear didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He just drove. Behind him, Lily's hand hung limp over the edge of the seat. Her lips were blue. Bear saw it in the mirror. And he drove faster. The rain would not stop. It hammered the windshield like a million tiny fists. Bear kept his eyes locked on the road ahead. His hands gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles looked white as bone. He ran a red light. A car swerved. Horns blared. He did not slow down. "Lily, come on," Danny whispered from the front seat. He had twisted around, both hands holding hers. Her small fingers were cold and limp. "You gotta stay with me. We're almost there. You hear me? Almost there." Bear glanced in the mirror. Her face was so pale. Her lips were blue. He pressed the gas harder. The hospital lights appeared through the rain like a beacon. Bear swung the truck into the emergency entrance, tires squealing on the wet pavement. He did not even put it in park. He threw open the door and ran. He carried Lily through the sliding glass doors. His boots left muddy tracks across the clean floor. Nurses looked up. A doctor spotted him and moved fast. "Help!" Bear's voice boomed through the lobby. "She's not breathing right, please." A team rushed forward. A gurney appeared. Bear laid Lily down on it gently, as if she were made of glass. Her head lolled to the side. Her eyes stayed closed. She had a head injury earlier, Bear said, breathing hard. There was a clot. They said it was fine. But she hit her head again. "I think. I don't know." "Please," the doctor nodded. He had steady hands and calm eyes. "We've got her. Come on, let's move." The team wheeled Lily through a set of double doors. Bear tried to follow. A nurse stopped him gently. "Wait here, sir. We'll update you as soon as we know something." Bear stood in the hallway. He was soaked. Mud dripped from his jacket. His hands were empty. Danny came running through the doors behind him, clutching his ribs. His face was wet with rain and tears. "Is she okay?" he asked. "Is she gonna be okay?" Bear didn't know how to answer. So he just pulled Danny into his arms and held him tight. They waited. The hallway lights hummed. A clock ticked on the wall. Bear counted the minutes in his head. 5, 10, 15, a nurse came out. Her face was serious. "We've stabilized her vitals," she said, "but she had a seizure moments after arrival. We're running an MRI now. The doctor will speak with you soon." Bear's stomach dropped. A seizure. He had seen seizures before. In the ring. In the streets. They were never good. Danny sank onto a plastic chair. He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Bear sat beside him. He put a heavy hand on the boy's back. "She's strong," Bear said. His voice was rough. "She's the strongest kid I know. She'll fight." Danny nodded. He didn't look up. The minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the doctor appeared. He walked toward them with slow, heavy steps. His face was grim. Bear stood up. His legs felt weak. The doctor held a tablet in his hands. He flipped it around to show a scan. On the screen, there was a dark spot in the center of a gray shape. Bear didn't need a medical degree to understand that something was wrong. "There's a blood clot in her brain," the doctor said. "It's a result of the original injury, and it has grown. It's putting pressure on her brain. We need to operate immediately to remove it." Bear's mouth went dry. "Operate? On her head?" "Yes, there's a high risk. She's young, she's strong. That works in her favor. But we cannot wait." A clipboard appeared in Bear's hands. A pen. A line to sign. His hand shook as he held the pen over the paper. "She's not my daughter on paper yet," he said. His voice cracked. "Can I even sign this?" The doctor nodded. "You brought her in. You're her guardian in this moment. That's enough." Bear signed. His name looked like a child's handwriting. Bear, but it was done. The nurses wheeled Lily out of the MRI room. She lay on a gurney, small and pale. An oxygen mask covered her face. IV lines ran from her arms. Bear walked beside her. He took her hand. It was so small in his big palm. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked at him. Her gaze was cloudy and tired, but she knew him. Her lips moved behind the mask. No sound came out. But Bear read the word. Bear, tears rolled down his face. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm here, baby. Daddy's here. You just hold on. I'll be right here when you wake up." Her eyes closed again. The gurney rolled toward the double doors. The surgical team stood ready. A nurse held the doors open. Bear had to let go of her hand. He hated it. Every part of him screamed to hold on tighter. The doors swung shut. They clicked closed with a soft sound. Bear stood alone in the hallway. The lights hummed. The clock ticked. He turned and collapsed into the plastic chair. He buried his face in his hands. And for the first time in 20 years, the big man cried. The clock on the wall said 11:47 p.m. 6 hours had crawled by like 6 years. Bear sat in the hard plastic chair with his elbows on his knees. He had not moved in what felt like forever. His coffee sat on the table beside him, cold and untouched. The cup had long stopped steaming. Danny was curled into his side. The boy had finally stopped shaking, but his eyes stayed open. He stared at the double doors like he could will them to open. The waiting room had filled up within the first hour. The crew had arrived in force. Jinx stood by the window, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. Mickey sat in a corner with a worn Bible in his hands, flipping pages slowly. The others lined the walls. A dozen leather-clad men and women. A wall of tattoos and silence. A hospital security guard had looked at them nervously at first. But Bear's crew did not cause trouble. They just waited. They brought coffee for the nurses. They moved chairs into a circle. They were quiet, but they were there. The chaplain came by around hour 3. He was a small man with a kind face and a gentle voice. He wore a simple black shirt with a white collar. He approached Bear and sat down beside him. "I heard there's a little girl in surgery," he said softly. "I wanted to offer a prayer." Bear's throat felt tight. He had not prayed in 20 years. Not since Molly. Not since everything. But he looked at Danny. The boy's eyes were wet. His hands were clasped in his lap. "Okay," Bear said. His voice was a rasp. "Yeah, pray." The chaplain bowed his head. Bear bowed his head too. Danny did the same. "Dear Lord," the chaplain began, "please watch over this little one. Give the surgeons steady hands and the family strength. Please grant them peace." Bear's lips moved. The words came out in a whisper so quiet only God could hear. "Please, God, don't take her. She's all he has. She's all I have too. Please." Beside him, Danny reached out. His small hand found Bear's big one. Bear held it tight. A nurse walked by with a fresh tray of coffee. She set it down and left. Nobody touched it. The cups just sat there, turning cold. Time moved slow. At hour 5, the double doors opened. A nurse stepped out. Everyone in the waiting room tensed. The crew straightened up. Jinx pushed off the wall. The nurse looked at them. Her face was unreadable. "She's still in surgery," she said. "It's going well. The doctor is just finishing up the last part." She walked away. The room exhaled. But nobody relaxed. Bear's shoulder ached. His back hurt. He did not care. Danny had fallen asleep against his arm. The boy's face was peaceful, but his brow was furrowed. Even in sleep, he worried. Bear looked down at him. This boy. This brave, stubborn boy. "You saved her," Bear whispered. "You don't even know it. But you saved her." Jinx came over. She knelt in front of Bear. Her voice was soft. "Talk to me, Bear." He shook his head. "I can't. Not yet. I'll talk when she's out." Jinx nodded. She squeezed his knee and stood up. At hour 6, the doors opened again. The surgeon walked out. He was still in his scrubs. His face was tired, but there was a smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Bear stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. Danny woke with a jolt. The surgeon walked toward them. He stopped a few feet away. "We removed the clot," he said. "It was tricky, but we got it all. She's out of danger. She'll need time to heal. A few weeks of rest and monitoring, but she will recover fully." Bear's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of the chair to steady himself. "She's okay?" he asked. His voice cracked. "She's really okay?" The surgeon nodded. "She's really okay. You can see her now." Bear sobbed. The sound tore out of him. Great, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. He did not care who saw. He did not care what anyone thought. Danny wrapped his arms around Bear's waist. The boy buried his face in Bear's leather jacket. "Thank you," Danny whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The crew exhaled, a collective breath. Jinx wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mickey closed his Bible and looked up at the ceiling, whispering a quiet thank you. The nurse led them down the hall. The lights were dim. The air smelled like antiseptic. And there she was. Lily lay in a small bed. Her face was pale but peaceful. The oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Bear walked to her side. He dropped to his knees. He took her small hand in his big one. "Hey, little one," he whispered. "I'm here. Daddy's here." Her fingers twitched. A tiny squeeze. Bear's eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they were happy tears. Danny stood on the other side of the bed. He stroked Lily's hair. "Told you I'd stay with you," he said. Told you we'd be okay. The surgeon watched from the door. He smiled and turned away. Bear stayed by Lily's side. He did not move. He did not plan to move. He would be there when she woke up. He would be there for the rest of her life. The night passed in a blur of beeping monitors and soft footsteps. Bear did not sleep. He sat in the hard chair beside Lily's bed, her small hand wrapped in both of his. The chair dug into his back. He did not move. At some point, a nurse brought him a blanket. He draped it over his shoulders but kept his eyes on Lily. Her chest rose and fell. The oxygen mask fogged with each breath. That was enough. That was everything. Danny came back around 6 in the morning. He carried 2 trays of cafeteria food. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. He set one tray on the table and held the other out to Bear. "You gotta eat," Danny said. His voice was soft but firm. Bear looked at the tray, then at Danny. The boy's eyes were red-rimmed. He had not slept much either. "Thanks, kid." Bear took a bite of toast. It tasted like cardboard. He chewed anyway. Danny sat on the edge of the bed and took Lily's other hand. "She looks better," Danny said. "Her color is coming back." Bear nodded. "She's a fighter, just like her brother." Danny's lip quivered. He looked down at Lily's face. "I don't know about that." "I do," Bear said. "You drove a truck through the rain to save her. You got help. You did what grown men are too scared to do. That's not luck. That's courage." Danny wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He did not say anything. He just squeezed Lily's hand. The crew rotated shifts through the day. Jinx came in the morning with coffee and a bag of snacks. She stood at the foot of the bed and looked at Lily for a long time. "She's got your chin," Jinx said quietly. Bear blinked. "What?" Jinx pointed at Lily's face. "That stubborn little chin. That's all you, Bear." Bear looked at Lily. He had not noticed before, but now he saw it. The same strong jaw. The same determined set to her mouth. His throat tightened. Mickey came in the afternoon. He carried a manila envelope. His face was serious, but his eyes were soft. "Bear," he said. The results came back. Bear's heart hammered. He stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. Mickey handed him the envelope. "Nah test. You and the kids. It's official." Bear's hands shook as he opened it. The paper inside was covered in medical jargon, but at the bottom, in bold letters, were the words he had been waiting for. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Bear read it 3 times. Then a 4th. The tears came before he could stop them. They rolled down his cheeks and dripped onto the paper. "They're mine," he whispered. "They're really mine." Mickey put a hand on his shoulder. "They always were, brother. You just didn't know it." Bear pulled out his phone. He called Mickey's number even though Mickey was standing right there. Mickey answered with a confused look. "Thank you," Bear said into the phone. His voice cracked. "Thank you for everything." Mickey smiled. Anytime, Bear, anytime. The second morning came with pale sunlight through the blinds. Bear had finally dozed off in the chair, his head tilted back, his mouth slightly open. He dreamed of Molly. She was smiling. She was holding 2 children, one in each arm. Then a small voice pulled him awake. "Bear?" Bear's eyes snapped open. He leaned forward. Lily's eyes were open. They were hazy and tired, but they were open. She looked at him with a confused little frown. "You're the bear in my dreams," she whispered. Her voice was scratchy and weak. Bear's breath caught. He reached out and gently brushed a curl from her forehead. "Hey, little one," he said softly. "I'm here. I'm right here." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Her skin was warm. She smiled. It was a tiny smile, barely there, but it was real. The door opened. Danny walked in holding a red balloon. It had a cartoon bear on it. He stopped when he saw Lily's open eyes. "Lily," he rushed to the bed. "You're awake." Lily giggled. It was a weak sound, but it was a giggle. "Danny, you got me a balloon." "I got you the best balloon," Danny said. He tied it to the bed rail. "It's a bear." "Like Bear?" Lily looked at Bear, then at the balloon, then back at Bear. "He's a big bear," she said. "The balloon is a little bear." Bear laughed. It was a wet, shaky laugh. "That's right, sweetheart. I'm the big bear." The doctor came in a few minutes later. She checked Lily's vitals and shined a light in her eyes. She smiled. "She's doing remarkably well," the doctor said. "The swelling is down. Her reflexes are good. I think we can discharge her in 2 days." Bear's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much." The doctor nodded and left. The room fell quiet. Lily's eyes drifted to Bear. She reached out her small hand. Bear took it. He held it gently. "I'm your real daddy," he said quietly. His voice was thick with emotion. "And I'm never leaving you. Not ever." Lily's eyes fluttered. She was already drifting back to sleep. But she smiled. "Good," she whispered. "I like you, Big Bear." Bear pressed her hand to his cheek. He closed his eyes. For the first time in 20 years, he felt whole. 2 days later, the hospital doors slid open, and Lily squinted at the morning sun. She was smaller than Bear remembered, worn, but her eyes were bright and alert, and her hand was wrapped tightly around his thumb. "Ready, little one?" Bear asked. Lily nodded. "I don't like this place anymore. It smells like soap." Bear laughed. "That's the worst kind of smell." He scooped her up in his arms. She felt light as a feather. She rested her head against his shoulder and yawned. Danny walked beside them, carrying a small bag of belongings and a stack of get-well cards from the nurses. The parking lot was full of motorcycles. A dozen bikes lined the curb in perfect rows. The crew stood beside them, helmets tucked under their arms. They cheered when Lily appeared. Jinx stepped forward first. She handed Lily a tiny leather jacket with patches on the sleeves. "Custom made," Jinx said. "Every real biker needs one." Lily giggled. She ran her fingers over the patches. "It's soft. Of course it is. Only the best for you." Bear buckled Lily into the back seat of his truck. Danny climbed in beside her. The drive to the cottage took 20 minutes. Lily fell asleep against Danny's shoulder, her mouth open, her breath even. Bear watched her in the rearview mirror. His chest ached with something he could not name. It felt like joy. It felt like fear. It felt like home. The cottage came into view. Bear's eyes widened. The porch was covered in balloons. Blue ones. Pink ones. Yellow ones. They bobbed in the breeze like a garden of color. A banner stretched across the railing. It read, "Welcome home, Lily." The crew had outdone themselves. Strings of fairy lights hung from the eaves. A wooden sign shaped like a bear stood by the door. It had Lily's name painted on it in bright letters. Lily woke up. She pressed her face to the window. "Whoa," she whispered. "Is that for me?" "That's for you," Bear said. "All of it." Danny helped Lily out of the truck. She walked slowly, still a little shaky, but she walked. Her feet crunched on the gravel. She stopped in front of the banner and read it out loud. "Welcome home, Lily." She looked up at Bear. "Is this my home?" "This is your home," Bear said. Forever, the living room was piled with gifts. A stack of picture books sat on the coffee table. A wooden train set waited in the corner. A giant teddy bear, bigger than Lily herself, sat on the couch. It wore a tiny leather vest. Lily hugged the teddy bear. She buried her face in its fur. "This is my new best friend," she said. Danny grinned. "What about me? You're my brother. That's different." Bear disappeared into the kitchen. He chopped carrots and celery. He opened a can of tomato soup and added a splash of cream. He stirred the pot while the kids played in the living room. Soon the whole cottage smelled like warm bread and herbs. He called them to the table. Lily climbed into her chair. She looked at the bowl of soup. She dipped her spoon in and took a careful sip. "Good," she said. The nurse made bad soup. It was green. It had lumps. Bear and Danny laughed. Lily kept going. She told them about the nurse who sang off-key. She told them about the man in the next room who snored like a bear. She told them about the food tray that fell on the floor and the nurse who said a bad word, then apologized to the wall. She said sorry to the wall. Lily giggled. The wall didn't say anything back. Bear laughed until his sides hurt. Danny laughed so hard he snorted soup out his nose. The evening came soft and golden. Bear carried Lily to her room. She had refused a bed. She wanted her crib because it was close to the window. The window faced the yard. She could see the stars from there. Bear tucked the blanket around her. He sat on the floor beside the crib and opened a picture book. The cover showed a big brown bear and two little cubs. The story was about a bear who lost his cubs in the forest. He searched for them through storms and rivers and caves. He never gave up. At the end, he found them curled up under an old oak tree, safe and warm. Bear closed the book. Lily's eyes were half closed. She reached out her hand. "You found me," she whispered. Bear's heart swelled. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. "Yes, I did." He turned off the light. The room glowed soft blue from the window. He walked to the door and stopped. Danny stood in the doorway. His eyes were wet. His hands trembled at his sides. "Dad?" Danny asked. His voice cracked on the word. Bear's breath caught. 20 years of emptiness, 20 years of running. And now this, "Yeah," Bear said. His voice was thick. "I'm here." Danny stepped forward. Bear opened his arms. The boy crashed into him. They held each other tight in the dim hallway, father and son, two broken pieces finally clicking into place. A week passed like a single breath. The cottage filled with laughter and the smell of pancakes. Lily grew stronger every day. She chased the chickens in the backyard. She painted pictures of bears and stuck them on the fridge with magnets shaped like motorcycles. But the court date loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Bear woke early that morning. He put on a clean white shirt and his best leather vest. He combed his hair and trimmed his beard. Danny came downstairs in a button-up shirt that was a little too big in the shoulders. Lily wore a sundress with tiny sunflowers on it. Jinx had braided her hair into two neat pigtails. "You look handsome," Lily told Bear. "So do you," Bear said. "Both of you." They drove to the courthouse in silence. Danny stared out the window. Lily held Bear's hand. The building was tall and gray and cold. It smelled like old paper and floor wax. The courtroom was packed. The crew filled the benches in their finest leathers. Jinx wore her cut with polished patches. Mickey sat in the front row, reading glasses perched on his nose, a folder thick with papers in his lap. Even the judge looked surprised at the sight of a dozen bikers sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes forward. The stepfather stood in the prisoner's dock. He wore an orange jumpsuit. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His eyes were hollow and empty, like windows in an abandoned house. He did not look at Bear. He did not look at the children. He stared at the floor. The judge read the charges: abuse of a minor, kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon. The stepfather's lawyer leaned over and whispered something. The stepfather nodded. "How do you plead?" the judge asked. "Guilty," the stepfather said. His voice was flat. Dead, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. Danny squeezed Bear's hand. Lily pressed her face into Bear's arm. The judge looked at Bear. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "Mr. Bear, do you wish to make a statement before I pass sentence?" Bear stood. His chair scraped against the floor. He felt every eye in the room on him. He looked at Danny. He looked at Lily. Then he looked at the judge. "I spent 20 years without knowing I had children," he said. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor underneath it. 20 years running from a ghost I didn't understand. I missed birthdays and first steps and nightmares and scraped knees. I missed everything. I won't waste another day. I love them, and I'll protect them with my life." The courtroom was silent. The judge removed her glasses and wiped her eyes. "Motion for full legal and physical custody is granted," she said. Her voice rang through the room. "Permanency for the minor children is hereby established with Mr. Bear, their biological father, as confirmed by DNA evidence." The stepfather's sentence came next: 15 years without parole. No chance of early release. The bailiff led him away. He did not look back. The gavel fell. The sound echoed like a door slamming shut on the past. The hallway outside the courtroom was bright and noisy. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. The crew flooded out of the courtroom in a wave of black leather and silver chains. They surrounded Bear, Danny, and Lily like a wall of armor. Mickey stepped forward first. He grabbed Bear's hand and shook it firmly. His eyes were wet behind his glasses. "You did good, son," Mickey said. Molly would be proud. Bear's throat tightened. "Thank you, Mickey, for everything." Jinx hugged Lily tight. "Looks like you're stuck with us, little one." Lily giggled. "I like being stuck with you." The double doors opened again. The judge stepped out, still in her black robe. She walked toward them, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Everyone went quiet. The judge knelt down in front of Lily. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small stuffed bear with a stitched smile and button eyes. She held it out. "You have a good papa, Lily," the judge said softly. "You're a very lucky girl." Lily's eyes went wide. She took the bear carefully, like it was made of glass. She hugged it to her chest. "Thank you," Lily whispered. "I'll name him Judge." The judge laughed. She patted Lily's head and walked away. Bear looked at Danny. Then he crouched down and scooped Lily up with one arm. He reached out his other arm. Danny hesitated for just a moment. Then he stepped forward, and Bear lifted him up too. Both children sat on his shoulders, giggling and squealing. Lily held her new bear in the air like a trophy. Danny gripped Bear's head for balance. "We're a family," Danny yelled. The crew erupted in cheers. Bikers clapped and hollered. Jinx whistled through her teeth. Mickey wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. Bear turned in a slow circle, letting the children see everything. The sunlight caught their faces. Their smiles were wide and real. Danny's laugh was loud and free. Lily's giggles chimed like bells. Bear looked up from the floor. His children filled his vision. His heart was so full it hurt. and for the first time in 20 years, he had no reason to run. The sun hung low and golden in the sky as Bear turned his truck down the long gravel drive. The house sat at the end of the lane, a modest ranch with white siding and a wide front porch. The garage door was open, and inside, a dozen Harleys gleamed in the fading light. Their chrome caught the sun like scattered stars. Danny pressed his face to the window. "This is your house?" "This is our house," Bear said. The truck had barely stopped before the backyard exploded with sound. String lights flickered on, casting warm yellow pools across the grass. A banner hung between two oak trees, hand-painted in bright letters, "Home at Last." The crew was already there. Jinx stood at a grill, flipping burgers with a spatula in one hand and a cold soda in the other. Mickey sat at a picnic table, a checkerboard set up in front of him. Bikers milled around with plates and drinks, laughing and slapping each other on the back. Lily's eyes went wide. "Is this a party?" "It's a party for you," Bear said, "for both of you." Lily squealed and wiggled until Bear set her down. She ran into the yard with her arms spread wide, her pigtails bouncing. The crew parted like a wave, bending down to ruffle her hair and shake her tiny hand. Danny hung back by the truck, his hands in his pockets. Bear knelt down beside him. "Hey, you okay?" Danny shrugged. "It's a lot." "It is," Bear said. "But you belong here. You belong with all of us." Danny looked at the crowd, at Jinx, who was waving him over, at Mickey, who had set out 2 checkerboards, at the big bearded bikers who were laughing and cheering for Lily as she twirled in circles. "I've never had that," Danny said quietly. "A whole group of people who just want me here." Bear put his hand on Danny's shoulder. "You have it now. And you always will." Danny took a breath. Then he squared his shoulders and walked into the yard. Jinx handed him a burger and a plate. Mickey called him over to the checkerboard. Within minutes, Danny was laughing, moving pieces, and trash-talking Mickey in a way that made the old man roar with laughter. Bear watched from the porch. He held a cold beer in his hand, but he hadn't taken a sip. He didn't need it. His chest was full of a warmth he hadn't felt in 20 years. Later, when the last biker had gone home and the string lights had flickered off, Bear led the children inside. The house was simple: a living room with a worn leather couch, a kitchen with yellow cabinets, a hallway with 3 doors. Bear opened the first door. "This is yours, Lily." Lily stepped inside and gasped. The bed was a canopy bed, draped in pale pink fabric that hung down like a princess castle. The walls were covered in stickers, bears and stars and moons and hearts. A small shelf held a row of stuffed animals, and on the pillow sat a brand-new teddy bear, bigger than Lily herself. She ran to the bed and jumped on it. "It's so soft, it's so big." "It's mine? All yours," Bear said. She hugged the big teddy bear and buried her face in its fur. Her voice came out muffled. "I love it, Papa." Bear's heart skipped. "Papa," she called him Papa. He didn't correct her. He didn't want to. He opened the second door. Danny's room. A simple bed with a blue quilt. A desk by the window, and on the desk, a chess set. The pieces were hand-carved, dark wood and light wood, beautiful and worn. Danny walked to the desk. He ran his fingers over the pieces. "This is for me?" "Mickey found it at a flea market," Bear said. He said, "A tactical mind like yours deserves a proper board." Danny picked up the White King. He turned it over in his hands. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were bright. Bear watched him for a long moment. "I know you lost your mom, Danny. I know life has been hard. But I want you to know, you're safe here. You're safe with me." Danny set the king down. He turned to Bear, and his eyes were wet. "I know," he said. "I believe you." That night, Bear tucked Lily into her canopy bed. He read her a new book, a story about a bear who learned to love a family of foxes. Lily listened with her eyes half closed, her new teddy bear tucked under her arm. When the story ended, she looked up at him. Her voice was small and sleepy. "Will you be here when I wake up?" Bear's throat tightened. He brushed a curl from her forehead. "Always," he said. She smiled and closed her eyes. Within a minute she was asleep, her breathing soft and even. Bear stood and pulled the covers up to her chin. He was about to leave when Danny appeared in the doorway. He stood there for a moment, then walked forward and wrapped his arms around Bear's waist. Bear froze. Then, he hugged him back, pulling Danny close. He felt the boy's shoulders shake, felt the weight of years of fear and pain in that embrace. Hey, Bear said softly. "You're okay. You're safe. I'm not used to that," Danny whispered into his chest. "Being safe." Bear held him tighter. "I'm proud of you, son." Danny pulled back and looked at him. His eyes were red, but there was a light in them. A hope that hadn't been there before. "Good night, Dad," Danny said. Bear's breath caught. "Dad." "Good night, son." Danny walked to his room and closed the door. Bear stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet sounds of his children sleeping. Then he walked into the kitchen. The light over the stove was on, casting a soft glow. He saw the family photos he had placed on the fridge. Molly, her smile bright and real. Danny, a toddler in her arms. Lily, a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. Bear reached out and traced Molly's face with his fingertip. His hand trembled. "I've got them now," he whispered. "I'm sorry I was late." The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the house, a child turned over in their sleep. Bear stood there for a long time, looking at the woman he had loved and lost, and at the children she had given him, and he let the tears fall. The next month flew by like leaves in the wind. Bear stood at the kitchen window every morning, watching Danny walk to the bus stop with his backpack slung over one shoulder. The boy walked tall now, not hunched like before. "Ready for school?" Bear had asked on the first day. Danny had nodded, but his hands shook. What if they don't like me? Bear had knelt down, eye level with his son. "They'll like you. Because you're a good kid. And if they don't, you tell me. I'll handle it." Danny had laughed at that. The sound was new, but it was real. Now, a month later, Danny talked about classes and teachers and a kid named Marcus who shared his lunch. He even mentioned a chess club that met on Tuesdays. Lily blossomed even faster. Every day, when Bear picked her up from kindergarten, she burst through the doors with paint on her hands and a story on her lips. "We made a turkey today. It's got feathers and everything." She carried home a new art project every single day. Bear taped them all to the refrigerator until the door disappeared under a mountain of purple glitter and orange construction paper. The crew showed up constantly. Jinx came by on Saturdays with a small dirt bike in the back of her truck. Danny's eyes nearly popped out of his head when she rolled it down the ramp. "You think you can handle it?" Jinx asked, hands on her hips. Danny looked at Bear. Bear nodded. Within an hour, Danny was puttering around the backyard, kicking up dust and laughing like a kid who had never known fear. Lily got her own lessons. Jinx sat her on the porch steps and painted her tiny fingernails pink and purple. Lily held her hands out, fingers spread, and stared at them like they were treasures. "Pretty," she announced. "Very pretty," Jinx agreed. "You'll be the best-dressed 6-year-old in town." As Thanksgiving approached, Bear announced his plan at a crew meeting. "We're hosting the feast," he said, "at the clubhouse. Everyone's invited. Families, too." The crew cheered. Mickey raised his glass. About time that old building smelled like turkey instead of oil and leather. Bear put Danny and Lily in charge of decorations. The Saturday before Thanksgiving, they spread butcher paper across the clubhouse floor and traced their hands to make turkey feathers. Lily insisted on making 11 turkeys, one for every member of the crew. Danny carefully cut out each one with safety scissors, while Lily colored them in bright orange and yellow. They hung orange streamers from the ceiling. They taped paper pumpkins to the walls. By the time they finished, the clubhouse looked like a Thanksgiving explosion had gone off. Bear surveyed their work and nodded. "Looks perfect," he said. The kitchen was another story. 3 turkeys sat thawing in the sinks. Jinx had commandeered the stove with her famous cornbread dressing. Mickey brought his grandmother's pecan pie recipe, handwritten on a yellowed card. The counters overflowed with sweet potatoes, green beans, rolls, and cranberry sauce. Every surface held something edible. "This is crazy," Danny said, watching Jinx wrestle with a turkey. "Crazy good," she replied. "Now grab that baster and make yourself useful." The night before Thanksgiving, the house was quiet. The turkeys were prepped. The pies were cooling on the counter. Lily was supposed to be in bed, but Bear heard her humming in her room. Bear and Danny stood in the garage. The old motorcycle sat in the center, gleaming under the single Bear bulb. Bear held a rag and a can of polish. Danny worked the chrome with a soft cloth, his motions slow and careful. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Danny paused. "Dad?" Bear looked up. "Yeah? Do you think Mom would be happy?" Bear set down his rag. He looked at the bike, then at his son. "I think she's watching us," he said, "and I think she's smiling." Danny's chin wobbled. He set down his cloth and stepped forward. Bear opened his arms, and Danny walked into them. They stood there, in the garage, the smell of polish and oil around them. "I miss her," Danny whispered. "I miss her too," Bear said. A voice called from the house. "Come look at the stars." Lily stood on the front porch in her pajamas, pointing up at the sky. Bear and Danny stepped out of the garage. The night was clear, a deep velvet blue scattered with thousands of glittering lights. The 3 of them stood on the porch together. Lily climbed onto Bear's shoulders, her small hands patting the top of his head. Danny leaned against the railing, looking up. "Look at all of them," Lily breathed. "It's so pretty." Bear looked at his children, and then at the sky. The stars stretched on forever, endless and bright. "Yeah," he said softly. "It is." Thanksgiving morning arrived with a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Bear woke before the sun, as he always did, but this time he didn't sit alone with his coffee. Danny stumbled into the kitchen in his pajamas, hair sticking up in every direction. "Can I help with anything?" Danny asked, rubbing his eyes. Bear handed him a bowl of eggs. "You can scramble these. And don't burn them." Danny grinned. No promises. By noon, the clubhouse buzzed like a hive. Motorcycles roared up the gravel drive one after another, their engines growling and popping. The crew arrived with their families. Kids ran between the tables. Women carried casserole dishes wrapped in towels. Men carried coolers and folding chairs. Jinx stood at the door, checking the temperature of the turkeys with a thermometer. 3 more minutes, she announced. Nobody touches the bird until I say so. The main table stretched across the center of the clubhouse. Someone had covered it with a white tablecloth. Someone else had placed a paper turkey centerpiece that Lily had made. It wobbled slightly in the breeze from the open windows. Bear sat at the head of the table. Lily was on his left, wearing her tiny leather vest over a frilly pink dress. She looked like a tiny biker princess. Danny sat on Bear's right, his new leather jacket hanging on the back of his chair. "Okay," Jinx said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Let's eat." The feast was magnificent. 3 turkeys, golden and steaming. Dressing that smelled like sage and butter. Mashed potatoes with pools of gravy. Green bean casserole topped with crispy onions. Sweet potatoes with marshmallows melted into a golden crust. Rolls so soft they dissolved on the tongue, and at the end of the table, Mickey's pecan pie, dark and shiny and perfect. Danny stood up with a carving knife in his hand. Jinx watched him like a hawk, giving instructions in a low voice. Cut against the grain. Slow and steady. You've got this. Danny carved the turkey with serious concentration. His tongue poked out of the corner of his mouth. The crew watched in silence, and then, when he sliced the first perfect piece, they erupted in applause. "Look at that boy go!" Mickey shouted. Danny's cheeks turned pink, but he kept carving. When he was done, he took his seat with a proud smile. Bear stood up. He raised his glass of sweet tea. The crew followed, lifting their own glasses. Cups, jars, and mugs clinked together in the air. "To family," Bear said. His voice was rough, but steady. "The ones we're given and the ones we choose." Every biker clinked their glass. The sound rang out like bells. "To family." They shouted together. Lily giggled and clinked her juice box against Bear's glass. Danny tapped his cup against Lily's, and for a moment, no one said a word. They just ate and laughed and passed dishes and told stories. Hours passed like minutes. The plates emptied. The pie disappeared. The kids ran wild between the tables, chased by laughing aunts and uncles in leather vests. The sun began its slow fall toward the horizon. As dusk settled in, the crew cleared the tables with practiced speed. Someone dragged logs into a circle. Someone else hauled a big metal barrel to the center and lit it. The bonfire crackled to life, orange flames licking at the darkening sky. Danny and Lily sat on a log with sticks in their hands. Marshmallows browned and dripped into the flames. Jinx roasted her marshmallow perfectly, turning it slowly until it glowed like a lantern. Lily's marshmallow caught fire immediately, burning black in seconds. "Uh-oh," Lily said. Jinx laughed. "Pull it off. The burnt part protects the gooey inside." Lily pulled it off, blew on it, and took a bite. Her eyes went wide. "It's good. Told you," Jinx said. Bear sat on a log at the edge of the circle. He watched his children laugh. He watched them roast marshmallows and talk with his brothers and sisters. He watched Lily try to sit on Mickey's lap, while Mickey pretended to grumble. He watched Danny show one of the younger crew members a chess move on his fingers. The firelight painted everything gold. Bear felt something hot in his chest. At first, he thought it was a cough. Then he realized. It was his heart, aching with joy. A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Lily noticed. She dropped her stick, ran across the circle, and threw her arms around him. Her small, warm body pressed against his chest. "Best daddy ever," she said. Bear's arms wrapped around her. He buried his face in her hair and breathed. Then Danny was there, sliding onto the log beside him, pressing close. Bear wrapped an arm around his son, too. The crew surrounded them. Jinx put a hand on Bear's shoulder. Mickey squeezed his other shoulder. Someone offered Bear a marshmallow on a stick. He took it. The fire crackled. The stars came out. The laughter continued around them. Bear looked up at the sky. The stars, uncountable, stretched out above him like a great blanket. He thought of a woman with a sunny smile and a gentle laugh. He thought of her hand in his, a lifetime ago. "Thank you, Molly," he mouthed silently. And he held his children close, surrounded by family, as the fire burned bright and warm. Morning light crept through the curtains of the back room. Bear had fixed it up nice. 2 bunk beds stood against opposite walls. The wood was sanded smooth and painted a warm gray. Blankets in deep red and soft blue covered each mattress. A small dresser held folded clothes. On the wall hung a framed picture of a mountain lake, painted by one of the crew members. Lily stirred first. Her blonde ringlet stuck out in every direction, wild from the bonfire and the smoke. She sat up and rubbed her eyes. "My hair feels funny," she said. Bear looked over from the floor, where he had been pretending to sleep on an old mattress. "Looks funny, too," Lily giggled. Then she looked at the top bunk. Danny. Danny groaned and rolled over. A clump of dried marshmallow was stuck in his hair, right above his ear. It looked like a tiny white rock. "You've got something in your hair," Lily said. Danny touched it. His face scrunched up. "Is that from last night?" Bear laughed. It was a deep rumble that shook his chest. "That's what happens when you try to eat 3 marshmallows at once." Danny pulled at the clump. It would not budge. "Can we get this out?" "After breakfast," Bear said. They walked into the main room of the clubhouse. The tables were still set up from the feast. Empty pie plates sat stacked in the corner. Someone had left a half-eaten roll on the floor, and a dog, someone's pet, was eyeing it with great interest. Jinx was already there. She had a pot of coffee going and a plate of leftover pecan pie on the table. "Good morning, little bears," she said. Lily climbed onto a chair. "I'm a bear." "That you are," Jinx said. Bear poured coffee into a chipped mug. He cut 2 slices of pie and set them in front of the kids. Danny attacked his with a fork. Lily used her fingers. "Today," Bear said, setting down his mug, "we start our real life." Danny looked up. His eyes were quiet, waiting. Bear reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 small leather bracelets. Each one had a tiny padlock charm hanging from it. He turned them over. On the inside, engraved in neat letters, were names and a date. Danny's bracelet read, Daniel, November 28. Lily's bracelet read, Lily, November 28. The date they became a family. Bear knelt between them. He took Danny's wrist and fastened the bracelet. The leather was soft and dark brown. Danny looked at it, turned it over, and looked at the engraving. His throat moved. He did not speak. Then Bear fastened Lily's bracelet. She held up her wrist and shook it. The padlock charm swung and caught the light. "It's so pretty," she said. Bear looked at Danny. "You're mine now. Both of you. No one can change that." Danny pulled his lips together. His eyes were wet. He nodded once. Then he reached over and grabbed Bear's hand and squeezed it. Jinx turned her back, pretending to check the coffee. Her shoulders shook just a little. That evening, the house on the hill felt different. It was a quiet place. Big windows. A porch that wrapped around the front. Bear had spent months getting it ready. Now it was finally a home. Lily was tucked into her bed. The sheets were pink with little moons and stars. A teddy bear sat on her pillow, the one the crew had given her. She held it tight. Bear sat on the edge of the bed with a worn storybook in his hands. He had read this story to her every night for 2 weeks. The words were soft and familiar. He read slowly, in his deep voice. Lily's eyes grew heavy. Her grip on the teddy bear loosened. By the last page, she was asleep. Bear closed the book. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Sweet dreams, little one," he whispered. He flipped off the lamp, leaving only the glow of the hallway light. Then he walked across the hall to Danny's room. Danny lay in his bed, the covers pulled up to his chin. His window faced the moon. Silver light spilled across his face. He was not asleep. His eyes were open, fixed on the glowing circle in the sky. Bear stood in the doorway. He did not want to break the quiet. But he also did not want to leave. "Good night, son," Bear said. Danny turned his head. The moonlight caught his eyes. For a long moment, he just looked at Bear. Then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that reaches all the way up to the eyes. "Good night, Dad." Bear's chest filled with something warm and heavy. He nodded. Then he stepped back and pulled the door until it was open just a crack. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool. Bear walked to the backyard. The crew was gathered there in silence. They stood in a loose circle, leather vests dark against the dark grass. Jinx was there. Mickey. A dozen others. No one spoke. Bear walked to the center of the circle. He held his coffee mug in both hands. The steam rose into the cold air. The crew raised their own cups. Coffee and a few beers. Some raised a hand or a fist. Bear lifted his mug to them. "To new beginnings," he said. The crew nodded. One by one, they stepped forward and clasped his shoulder. A handshake. A pat on the back. No words needed. They left the way they came, boots crunching on gravel, engines starting softly in the distance. Bear stood alone in the yard. He looked up at the house. 2 windows glowed warm. 2 small silhouettes were visible behind the glass. One in the top bunk. One in a bed with pink sheets. He raised his coffee to the windows. "You're safe now. I've got you." The stars burned bright above the house. The moon hung low and golden. And inside, 2 children slept peacefully for the first time in their lives. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.